Today we're going to start discussing. Actually, we will start. I hope we'll start and finish the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes, or the Hebrew name is Koheleth. Koheleth. Okay, so they are the same thing. In some Bibles you will see Koheleth, and even in the text itself you will see the name of the one who is talking is called Koheleth. Koheleth. We'll talk about what that means, what the name means. But the book of Ecclesiastes is not well known. It's not well known, but there are certain texts in that book that people love very, very well. Some people don't even know that that text comes from Ecclesiastes. When you hear there is a time for this, a time to dance, a time to laugh, a time to cry, a time to do this, a time to die, and all that. Some people know about that, but they don't even know where it comes from in the Bible. But for you, I believe that most of you know already, and from now on, I'm hoping that you will have a handle on this book and know what it's all about. Okay, and you can go into that book to find a text to help you understand something in life. Or when you hear it read in church, you can put it in context. You can remember certain words that we talk about here, and that can make you understand what the book is about. Okay, so for our prayer, I'm going to read from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 15. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 15. And that basically is about the time to do different things. So let us use that as our prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. There is an appointed time for everything, and a time for every affair under the heavens, a time to give birth, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to uproot the plant, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to tear down, and a time to build, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them, a time to embrace, and a time to be far from embraces, a time to seek, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to rend, and a time to sow, a time to be silent, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. What profit have workers from their toil? I have seen the business that God has given to mortals to be busied about. God has made everything appropriate to its time, but has put the timeless into their hearts so they cannot find out from beginning to end the work which God has done. I recognized that there is nothing better than to rejoice and to do well during life. Moreover, that all can eat and drink and enjoy the good of all their toil. This is a gift of God. I recognize that whatever God does will endure forever. There is no adding to it or taking from it. Thus God done that he may be revered. Thus has God done that he may be revered. What now is has already been. What is to be already is. God retrieves what has gone by. O Lord, thank you for bringing us to this moment when we continue to discuss your wisdom expressed through sacred writers, especially in Koheleth. We ask you to continue to minister upon our minds and upon our hearts, that we may receive your word and that we may have all the tools we need to be able to understand it and use your word in the practice of our lives. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. So, thank you for coming again, and now let us talk about Ecclesiastes. So as I said from the beginning, the proper name is Koheleth, and what we are going to do from now is that we're going to talk about introduction. I'm going to introduce the book. I'm going to talk about who wrote it and its name, what its name means, and then we will talk about the unity of Koheleth, because this book is like all over the place. You cannot have a handle on it. You cannot put them together. Sometimes that is even look like one person wrote the whole book because of the ideas that we see in there. And also some kind of insinuations that we see. It looks like the person who wrote it lived in Solomon's time. And then at certain point, it looks like the person who wrote it lived much, much later than Solomon. Has new ideas that even Israelites will not have at that time. Ideas that you can put in maybe India or someplace. Okay, so you see those over there, and so we always talk about the unity of Koheleth. How do we put it together as one writing? And then we will talk about the two central texts. But the two central texts all tell us the message, the general messages that this book seeks to teach. The general messages. So those messages are the ones that I will let you take away, so that when you are reading this book, any part of this book, you can think about these messages, the general messages that the book really seeks to teach. Okay. And so that's how we're going to proceed. And so let us look at the introduction. First of all, we consider the name. The name Ecclesiastes, the English Ecclesiastes, comes from the Latin ecclesia or Ecclesiastes, which is not to be confused. This name Ecclesiastes, there is another book in the wisdom literature that is called Ecclesiasticus. So don't confuse Ecclesiastes with Ecclesiasticus. Okay, so we will be learning Ecclesiasticus later on, sometime in December or after the new year. But so don't confuse Ecclesiastes with Ecclesiasticus. But Ecclesiastes is from the Greek ecclesia, which means assembly or community. But that also the Greek came from the Hebrew. The Hebrew was the original language of the Old Testament. Okay, so Hebrew was that. And the Hebrew, it was called Koheleth. Okay, Koheleth. And that word comes from the Hebrew word kahal. The root word is kahal, which means assembly. Now, assembly of what? Okay, so that makes us see that Koheleth could be related to an assembly. But is it an assembly of sayings? Look at poems, assembly, that we put some poems together. We assembled some poems together. Or it could also mean an assembly of worshippers who are gathered to learn, to be taught by a teacher or a preacher. Okay, that assembly is what we are talking about. So we can think about an assembly of sayings. Of course, as we have in the book itself, we have a lot of sayings. And as I said from the beginning, the sayings here sometimes don't match. They don't look like the same person who wrote them, but they're collected together, assembled together. Okay. Or we think about it as assembly of worshipers that are gathered by a teacher or a preacher. Actually, the word preacher is the title that in the German language that was given to it. Preacher is the name. Vanity of Vanities says the preacher, not Kohelet. They translated it to be preacher in the German language. And remember that German was the first vernacular language apart from the ancient languages. German was the first to have the Bible translated into by Martin Luther. Martin Luther, when he broke out of the Catholic Church, at that time, the Bible was in Latin. What we call the Vulgate is the translation from the Greek and Aramaic. Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew were the original languages of the Bible. Hebrew and Aramaic were for the Old Testament, and Greek was for the New Testament, the original language. Okay. Now, when Saint Jerome in the 3rd century translated the entire Bible from Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew, translated it to Latin. That became the language, that became the Bible of the church for over 1,500 years. Okay. And so in the 16th century, when the church was still using the Latin text, it was called the Vulgate, the Latin text of the Bible, Martin Luther broke out of the Catholic Church, and when he left the Catholic Church, he translated the entire Bible into German for the first time. And Martin Luther was a German, anyway. So he translated, and then that is what the first vernacular language. In those days, if you have never been to school, you spoke German, English, French, all these, they were called the vernacular language. It's the language for peasants, people who had never been to school. English, Portuguese, Spanish, German, Italian, all those were the language of those who are illiterate. They couldn't read. Nothing was written in those languages. Everything was written in Latin. If you have been to school, you spoke Latin. Latin was elite language. Okay, it was written language. So Martin Luther was the first to translate the Bible from the elite language, Latin, to German for the first time, so that the Germans can also read by themselves in their own language. Okay. So in the German, title of the book means preacher, of Ecclesiastes. So that gives us an idea of who this person is, who the author is, or what the name means. I'm sorry. The name Ecclesiastes means an assembly of worshipers ready to learn, and then ready to be taught by a preacher. Okay. Sometimes some people even consider the author to be actually Kohelet himself, the assembly. The author is the assembly. Okay, and he is the one preaching. So Kohelet sometimes is thought about as the preacher. Okay, and now let us talk about when this book was written. I mean, when we are talking about writings of the wisdom books, I told you before, it's also, we are considering when they were collected, because some of these things were already being lived. It was practiced. So people looked at it and then assembled them and put them together. Okay, so when were they collected and put together into a book like this? And scholars have seen that this book was collected around 250 BC, 250 BC to 300 BC. Okay, you can add that to your note. 250 BC to 300 BC. In that span of time that it was collected. And it was believed to be collected in Palestine, the place where Israel is. The whole area is Palestine. And therefore we would like to say a few more about who the author, the person himself who collected them, who wrote them, or who assembled them. The author is known to have lived in Jerusalem when the Jews were colonized by Egyptian kings and powers who were called the Ptolemies. Okay, the Ptolemies were from Egypt, who had invaded Israel or Palestine and were colonizing the Jews. At this time, the Jews had returned from exile. Okay, and so they were being colonized. But this was before Alexander the Great conquered. He conquered the Egyptians and then took over and colonized also the Jews. So the Greeks, the Egyptian kings were colonizing this place, and the way they did it is that they only took taxes from them. They didn't actually change the culture of the Israelites. They didn't tell them what to do, what not to do. They only took money out of them and sent it and enriched themselves with it. They only took taxes, okay, and asked them to do whatever they want. They were free to do whatever they wanted. People were doing all kinds of things, whatever they wanted, and that can tell you the context why the preacher was talking about things like that, because people were doing things that they want. People were all over the place. So if you hear things like vanity of vanities, when the preacher was talking about vanity of vanities and talking about it's a time to do this, a time to do that, a time to do that, he was actually trying to reach his people to let them know that yes, you're doing whatever you want, you are free to do whatever you want, but hey, remember that it's not whatever you want to do, also have time to do it. You don't just do whatever you want. You should look at what time are you talking about, okay? When you say there's a time to kill, hold on. I mean, some people have come to me, they're like, Father, I don't understand this. Why did he say there's a time to kill? There's no such a time that we should kill, right? But then we can ask ourselves, a time to kill what? That's when you're trying to answer. A time to kill what? What are we going to kill? Because remember, he says kill, but not. We have to put it in a context. He doesn't give us an object, a time to kill only. Maybe it's a time to kill the virus. That makes sense. a time to kill the fire. Okay. a time to kill the snake that is going to bite me. Yes. There's a time like that. And then there's a time that I don't have to kill that snake because that snake is not venomous. That snake is my pet. Okay, so this is very important that people were doing whatever they wanted. I would like to make a little comparison with these Egyptian kings, how they ruled the Jews, how they colonized the Jews, with how the British colonized my country, Ghana. Okay, so there were these two European countries that colonized heavily Africa. You know, in Africa, all the countries you see, like Ghana, Togo, Benin, Nigeria, all these countries were not countries like that. those countries were created by Europeans, Europeans occupying the land and occupying the people and colonizing the places and divided the lands like that. There is nothing, if you go to any of the boundaries in Ghana or any African country, the boundaries, you will see that those who lived on the left side in this country are the same people who live on the other side in another country. So the Europeans actually divided the land according to what size of the land they wanted and put a lot of people together and called them a country. Okay. So that is the kind of thing. And so you have the French and the British. They were dividing a lot of the land. If you go to Africa now, the official languages are either French or English. English-speaking countries and French-speaking countries. There are a couple of them that speak Portuguese, okay, like Angola. But mostly the African countries either speak English or French. Okay. Now the English colonies, the English, they didn't change the life of their colonies. They didn't change the life of the people. What the English did was they only said, look, you do whatever you want, you live your life, you dress like you want to dress, you eat like you want to eat, and do everything, and we will take 75% of your GDP. We will take that and send it to Britain, okay, to enrich the Queen. Okay. That's what they did. They were mining the gold, they were exploiting the people and taking that away and say, do whatever you want. We are not going to change your lifestyle. No, yeah, do whatever you want. That is the kind of thing that the Ptolemies were doing in Israel, okay? So they didn't change their lifestyle. The Greeks who came later on, the Greeks changed the people's lifestyle. They made them eat pork, which is against their tradition. They made them worship idols and all kinds of things. They changed their language. Okay. The Ptolemies didn't do that. The Ptolemies said, speak your language, do whatever you want, and then we will take taxes from you. That's all. And then that's it. So the people were free to do whatever they want. In the French-speaking countries in Africa, the French, they were like the Greeks. They changed the French-speaking countries. They changed their lifestyle. They make them drink wine anytime they want to eat food. They drank wine because the French love wine. They change, traditionally they change their language, they change everything. Their currency is still now today, French-speaking countries in Africa still have their currency called franc. Franc, like the French franc. But the English-speaking countries, after colonization, we stopped using pound sterling and all those things. We stopped using that. We now use our own currency. Okay, and we stopped driving like in Britain. We started driving on the right side of the road. We started driving like the United States drives. Okay, we don't drive on the other side. So that's to explain what actually the context was when this author wrote, when this book, Ecclesiastes, was written. So if you're reading those things, a time to do, it is in context. It was preaching to his followers not to think that everything goes at any time. Right. Okay. So let us talk about the unity, the fact that there's a confusion as to whether one person wrote this book or there might be multiple hands. Many different people wrote the book because some of the ideas don't match. But what we want to say is that what we want to claim is that they match. Why? Because of certain things, although it's a confusion, there is some sense that we can make out of it. The author sometimes is thought as Solomon himself wrote these. We think about that. There's an argument to be made for the fact that Solomon himself wrote the book. Because in the book itself, the author claims to be Solomon. Chapter 1, verse 1 says that. The son of David. Okay? The son of David. And that was the exercise that I asked you to read, chapter 1 of that. When you begin, the author identifies himself as the son of David. The son of David is Solomon. Okay? But later ideas, when you are reading it, you encounter ideas that are later than Solomon. You encounter ideas that are later than Solomon. Solomon will not possibly have those ideas, because those ideas that we are going to look at soon they don't match Solomon's ideas. The writing is similar, though. The writing is similar to the book of wisdom of Solomon. So again, we are making an argument and destroying the argument by making an argument. That's how confused this book is. Then there is also to consider a different author other than Solomon. Another argument that can be made for a different author than Solomon. You can make an argument for Solomon. You can make an argument against Solomon and say it's not Solomon who wrote this book. And what is the argument? The book expresses many later ideas than Solomon that would have been rejected as inspired book by the canonists. You know, every religious community, like the Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all of them went into the same part of writings and selected which ones are going to be their Bible. Okay? They went to the same part. There were so many books that were written. So many books. But each religion, actually, at some point of their history, there were people who were called canonists, those who got together to select which book they believe is inspired by God and made it into their, what you call, canon. They made it into their set of books. So that's for the Israelites, for the Jewish people, their canonists would have rejected some of the ideas, that were in Ecclesiastes. They would have rejected it if the book came from later times. Okay, so that's what we are expressing here. There are later ideas in a book of Ecclesiastes. Later ideas. So you can make an argument that Solomon did not write these books. Okay. So the last thing I want to tell you about that is the book is very disorganized. It's not organized. It's disorganized. However, there's a general teaching, and you can draw a line. And that line that you can draw through it is its pessimism on life. Okay, it looks like it was written by different people, but it looks like it's disorganized, but you can see that they all are saying the same thing. They are pessimistic about life. They're not optimistic. This book is very pessimistic. Although with a little small, there's two spots where there is a little optimism. The book is very pessimistic. And it teaches wisdom through pessimism, suspicion about life. When people put all their life, or bank their life on the life that we are living right now, this book says, take a minute. Don't put all your chickens in this life. That's what this book says. I don't trust this life. This life is not everything that we got. This life is vanity. You know? This life is not worth giving everything that you have. So it's very suspicious. And so learn how to learn how to live this life. That's wisdom. Learn how to handle this life. And we'll say more about this. And we're going to come back again talking about this kind of suspicion and pessimism. So now let us look at the message. The message of Ecclesiastes. And this is very important. All these messages fall into two categories. The first one is vanity of vanities. That's what you read. You read the first chapter. But the other message, the other main message, so the two main messages, first is vanity of vanities. The second main message is a time for everything, which I read from chapter 3, okay? But I'm going to tell you all that this book teaches. So keep these things, these titles in mind whenever you are reading Ecclesiastes. So what does it mean by vanity of vanities? All is vanity. We have to study that, what vanity means. The word vanity is a wind. Vanity is a wind. And by that, they mean hollow, something that is non-substantial, something that is like a breath that goes, when you smell a breath, it doesn't last long and then it's gone, okay? In Hebrew, it is the word hebel, hebel. And hebel is where we get the name Abel from. And you all know who Abel was, okay? You all know who Abel was? Those are the sons, one of the sons, the younger son of Adam and Eve, okay? Adam and Eve had two babies, boys. One was Cain, the other is Abel. And then Cain killed his brother Abel. So Abel's life, Abel is named Abel because he didn't last long. He didn't last long. Abel vanished, disappeared. He came into we read about him in Genesis, and he doesn't last long and he's gone. That's how it's like so the meaning of hebel is actually mist. You know how a mist disappears. So vanity expresses how quickly a mist disappears. It is transitory. It's not lasting. Transitory. It's not permanent, like Abel's own life in Genesis. Okay. So that's the vanity that he's talking about, and it's talking about everything is vanity. Everything in this world is vanity. Is not going to last long. Now, so he's teaching us wisdom. That wisdom is to know how to handle something that is not going to be there for a long time. You will be wise if you learn how to live with things that are fleeting, that are going to go away, okay? So like if you find yourself in sorrow, or you're sad, that you know that is not going to last long. It's just transitory. So if you have wisdom, that can help you to live through sorrow. Same as success. If you are successful, you know that that's not going to last long. There's a shelf life to that thing, okay? So, so wisdom is how to handle these things and use them. Same with human beings. Same with our spouses and our friends. They'll all be going away. Wisdom is to learn that and know that and be able to live through it, live through loss. Wisdom can help us to be able to do. So that is how Ecclesiastes is trying to teach wisdom. He's trying to teach wisdom to let people know the reality and the pessimism, to be pessimistic about life, to be suspicious about life, to not hold life to be something that is forever. That is wisdom. So that's the first thing, vanity of vanities. Okay, keep that in mind, and when you read the text, you are able to understand where it's going. any part of the text. The other thing is the foreign concepts that you find, the foreign concepts of life, life concepts. Many of the concepts that we see here, we don't find in any biblical literature. Okay, even in the wisdom tradition, the pessimism and fatalistic concept that this book has. This book looks like life is fate. It's like it's bound to happen. It's condemned and no optimism about life. That idea is unknown in wisdom, in even many of the wisdom books. It's unknown. So this book stands out. These are foreign concepts. Okay? They are foreign concepts that come from their ancient philosophies like Stoicism. Stoicism, the Stoics are people who are cynical about anything. Okay, they are very cynical people. They think about life like that. So we find cynicism and skepticism in Ecclesiastes. That's a foreign idea in the biblical literature. Okay, so that makes it a foreign concept. Also, there's another one. Although you have the Stoics, you also have those who are Epicurean ideas. Epicurean ideas are more hedonistic, or the enjoyment of pleasure, excessive love of pleasure. Okay, so you have that. You are pessimistic about life. You are suspicious. You are suspicious about life things about life, and yet you still say enjoy it, enjoy it, enjoy it. So it's like, what are we talking about here? They are like not matched. These are some of the things that let us feel like maybe it's not one person who wrote the book. The different people wrote the book and it was put together. So there are hedonistic ideas, love of pleasure, and then there are Stoic ideas that is pessimistic about life. And so some of those hedonistic ideas, as well as we have ideas from Eastern wisdom, the wisdom from the Eastern countries that are similar to India, for instance. We can find some Indian ideas in this book. Okay, so it makes it hard to think about it as written by one book, but one person. But this message of foreign concepts of life, it's a book that tells us about to look at life not in one way. Mm-hmm. It's a book that teaches that we shouldn't look at life in one way, because it buys into different ideas from different places and puts them together about how to look at life. So it is wise to look at life in a hybrid, complex, unlimited to one tradition. Life is always changing. If you look at life like that, you will be able to solve many of the problems of life, because you are not holding it in just one angle. You have multiple different ways by which you deal with life. So you may be successful. If you're not successful with this way, you have another way to look at it. You have another way to look at it. With this one fails, you try another one. Okay, so that's the kind of way it's teaching us. The book of Ecclesiastes teaches us, don't look at life in one single way. Look at life in complexity of perspective. Okay? Complexion of perspective and unlimited. If you can use Indian tradition to understand some part of life, use it. Don't lock yourself up in just one way of looking at things. Okay, so that's very interesting for us to understand. The next one is that life is tragic. Life is tragic. Mm-hmm. Tragedy is a stuff of life. Okay, it's part of life. Okay, so and when you read, there's a time for this, there's a time for that, there's a time for this, at least know that is what life is. And that there are times you're not going to be a person of love always, because we are not. It is impossible for us to be in love always whilst in this world. Remember, he is pessimistic about life. So he asks us that when time comes in our life that we are experiencing hatred, we are experiencing something bad, we should remember that there's a shelf life for it. There's a time for everything. There's a shelf. That's not going to last. There's a time that is going to change. And that can help us to be able to endure or handle whatever happens to us. So life is tragic. Wisdom comes later in life and too late to be used because of old age. In this book, there's no concern about afterlife. Don't even think about dying and going to do something. This is the life that you've got. You should use it. You should work. You should handle it. Don't run away from it. Handle it. It is your time to handle it. Life is short. This book believes life is short. Life is not forever. Life is short. And it's not certain. There's nothing certain. This book actually throws cold water into people who think that there should be absolute. Certain things are absolute. Ecclesiastes says no. Ecclesiastes says nothing is absolute. Everything is changing. There can be a change. Different things can happen. But he asks us, even though it's changing, that doesn't mean we shouldn't work with it. This is very interesting for me, because sometimes people look at you and say, "Oh, but you are going to you won't last." So I cannot. I have seen people who have married people who were on their deathbed in the hospital. I saw that one time. I did officiate a marriage between someone who is dying. Not that they were not married. Someone who has an illness that they know, I mean, it's not going to, according to science and whatever, they know that this is not going to, but they still got married. So this is very important, that life is fragile, is tragic, is changing, but you have to work it. You still have to work with it. And by being able to work with it, it's wisdom that will help you to do that. Wisdom helps you to be able to work with something that is tragic, that is not going to last. So you remember that when we dealt with traditional wisdom in Proverbs chapter 1 verse 9, traditional wisdom believes in optimistic about life. So this kind of balances. Kohelet balances Proverbs. It tries to nuance Proverbs a little bit. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 9 is overly optimistic about life. It's like absolutes. Kohelet says, not too fast, not too fast. Life is not that all absolute, all certain. You have to leave the back door a little open so that you have possibilities. Okay, you have possibilities. So that's what Ecclesiastes is. The positive messages, so where there are little positive, certain positive things that are thrown into this. Even that has to be explained. So one of the first positive message that we get from this book is that life goes on. Okay, so this life, what you have right now, it doesn't. It's not going to last. What you have right now is not going to last. But life is always continuing. It's going to go on. And so in what manner, the question you will ask is, what manner is it going to go on? In what way? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves. In what way is life going to go on? But this particular one, the way you know it right now, is not going to be the same. But life continues. Okay, So we search for how it's going to continue so we can continue to live it. So if I know that life continues after death, but not in this way, not in having a house or car, well, then I can continue to live and give my life to it. The second thing is that things in the world have a time and place, like we just said. So things in the world, so it follows, life goes on. Things in the world will end, but life will continue. So there's a shelf life to things that you find in the world. Time and place. Time and place. Okay, not just time, but time and place. So that's a message for us. So there is some order. So it contains some order that should be respected and appreciated. So okay, so we say pessimist. These things are fleeting, but still you should respect them. You still should. That's a kind of contradiction, but all that he's trying to say is confusion, contradiction are part of life. They are part of life. Nothing, you should not resign. You should not fold your hand and say, these things are too complex. They are like, they're like a mishmash. I'm not going to do anything at all. I'm just going to freeze. No, don't freeze. You still have to work with it. Work with the complexity. And then, so that's what it says in C. The positive message is enjoy life. Work with moderation. Enjoy life, but with moderation, with caution, not with attachment, but with detachment. When you are dealing with these things in life, detachment doesn't mean you should let it go, but you should bond yourself to your pet, your house, your whatever it is. Enjoy them, but when you don't have them, continue to live. Continue to. Can you survive without them when they are not there? Or do you think like death? If you don't have, or if you can, now that you can walk, enjoy it. But when the time comes, a time is coming that you cannot walk. What would you tell yourself? Will you tell yourself like you are no more human beings, or you are no more good? No, you should still be able to know. That's a life of detachment. I live my life in a way that I can live with nothing and I can live with plenty. St. Paul says that. St. Paul expresses this wisdom. He says, I can live with little and I can live with plenty. Okay, we should be able to do that. That's wisdom. Okay. So then the other message that it teaches is that God is sovereign, like Job. At the end of Job realized that God is sovereign, and sovereign person causes themselves. Nobody causes a sovereign. Nobody determines a sovereign. Like when we say a sovereign nation, no other country determines that nation. If a country determines another nation, it means that nation is colonized, colonialism or imperialized. But nations are sovereign. They determine themselves. They determine what to do. Okay, so God is like that. God is sovereign, and God's people in the world, God is free to do with the world how God chooses. God is free to take me out tonight. God is free. No one can question God for taking me out tonight or tomorrow or leave me to live 1,000 years. That's God's prerogative. We have to give God that. We have to let God be God. So fear God, okay? So he teaches that. Fear God, again, you know what fear of God means. The fear of God means do the things that love to do God's will. That's fear God. Learn to do God's will. So So that's one message that comes to us. God is sovereign, like Job. And remember that Job and Ecclesiastes, Job also has a pessimistic idea about life. Okay. So Koheleth and Job challenge the overconfidence of Proverbs chapter 1 verse 9. Okay. Now the books of wisdom in the Bible, they are not the same. They approach life from different angles. Some are pessimistic, some are optimistic. Some are theological, they are all talking about God, God, God. Some are secular, they're all talking about world, human beings and things. Okay. But they all are trying to look at life from different angles. And they challenge one another to make us have the full picture of wisdom. So we can, and by the way, all of us who are watching, all of us who are studying right now, we all don't have the same perspective on life. Okay. We can see that in our news media, even like I said some time ago, the news media, because somebody watches MSNBC, somebody loves to watch Fox News, somebody who likes to watch NBC, others want, so, and the cameras, the MSNBC camera is different from the Fox News camera. And when they all capture the same thing, life, something that happened, they all capture it, but then they all report it differently in their news stations. If you go watch, you can see, you can go out there and watch that thing that happened in the junction, and all these cameras were there, and you yourself watched it, and then you go home at night and look at how it's reported, go flip from Fox News, MSNBC, CBS, and all those, and watch them. You'll be like, oh my God, that's not the way it happened. Because you saw it. You saw what happened. And the way it's reported, they're all different, because life is like that. Life has different angles. That is why the wisdom books, when we take them all together, we see this complexity of life. That's wisdom. If we know that, if I know that life is complex, when things are happening in my life, I would just stay on, make sure that it doesn't knock me off my belief of being a lovely person, and try to go through things like that, because these things are part of life and they have no shelf life. They will change tomorrow. Like in the African American community, they say joy comes in the morning. Joy comes in the morning. There will be another day. It's going to be night. It's all not going to be the night all the time. It's not going to be night forever. No. There's going to be morning, the dawn. And with the morning, there's a new perspective. So also, like when somebody does something against you and you want to react right away. If somebody hits you and you want to react, you might react in the wrong way. Somebody insults you and you want to react, you might insult the person back. But if you wait a little bit and say, okay, let me go think about this a little bit. Let me go think about how I'll respond. And you sleep. And you wake up the next day, many times you will not respond with insult, especially if you're a Christian or if you are a believer, you will not respond the same way, because there's a new thing. There's a shelf life to everything, because life is like that. Okay, Ecclesiastes helps us to factor this in. So that's the book. If you read it from beginning to the end, you will be encountering a lot of things that fall into these messages, and that will help you to understand what the book is about. So thank you all for coming, and our next book to study is Sirach, Ecclesiasticus. Okay, so this is Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiasticus is the next book. Some of you will have some of the Catholic Bibles have it as Ecclesiasticus. The other name of it in other Catholic Bibles is Sirach. Sirach. S-I-R-A-C-H. Sirach. Or you will have it in other books, especially like the New American Bible, also a Catholic Bible. It is written as Wisdom of Ben Sirah. Wisdom of Ben, B-E-N, Sirah, S-I-R-A. Okay. So Ecclesiasticus or Sirach or Wisdom of Ben Sirah. Okay. All right. So begin to read that. Read chapter 1 and see what is there and get ready for when we come back. Thank you. Unmute yourself and we say goodbye. Happy Thanksgiving.